Please, God.
This is God.
Hello, fellow marvelous viewers, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we are going to dive into the dark and twisted family tree of one of the most famous, or I should say notorious with a capital N, horror villains to have ever existed, Freddy Krueger. True horror fans of the 80s are surely familiar with him, but what about his mommy and daddy? I know what you are thinking. This monster has a family? Well, yes. Join us as we explore the lives of his family members and unmask which links have fueled the legacy of the Springwood slasher. Don't be scared. Buckle up. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Might be your dream, but it's my rules!
Freddy Krueger. Before we move on to the rest of his family, let us start with the man and, later on, the monster himself, Freddy Krueger. Originally known as Frederick Charles Krueger, his saga of darkness and evil has left an indelible stamp on horror history. Freddy Krueger had an absolutely horrible upbringing. His foster father was an alcoholic, and he endured physical and psychological violence on a regular basis. This background just added gasoline to his fury and psychopathy. As he grew older, his attitude deteriorated. He developed the practice of inflicting suffering on little animals and, later on, children. As an adult, Freddy tried to lead a normal life. He married a woman and even had a daughter. But beneath the cloak of this family man came out a thriving monster. He soon started haunting the town of Springwood, Ohio, kidnapping and killing kids in his unique way. Freddy's ways were awful. He created a glove with razor-sharp blades attached to its fingers, which he used to torture his victims in such a horrid way that they would end up dying. This glove was to be one of his most iconic symbols. Freddy Krueger was eventually arrested for the murders of over 20 children in Springwood, but the arresting officers botched the arrest warrant and he was finally let go. Enraged by the number of deaths, the parents of the victims decided to take extreme measures to stop the killings. One day, they followed him into the boiler room at his job and set him on fire. Well, as one can guess, this didn't stop Freddy Krueger from continuing to kill. It turned out that his evil spirit had survived and was nourished by the fear and repulsion of his tortured victims. In death, Freddy Krueger gained even greater power. He changed into a supernatural being capable of entering people's dreams. His charred, deformed visage and characteristic bladed glove tormented the dreams of Springwood's adolescents. In the dream world, Freddy had godlike power, twisting reality to his whim and torturing and killing his victims. The line between dreams and reality blurred, and Freddy's victims frequently met their fate in both worlds. The ability to infiltrate dreams made Freddy close to invincible. His strength came from the fears he engraved on people. Therefore, he could wield his command over the dreamscape and turn it into a house of horrors. He would enjoy the horror of his victims by manipulating their worst fears. His wicked sense of humor and tendency to mock his captives heightened further the scary presence that Freddy exuded. However, while Freddy Krueger's character underwent a few changes throughout the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, his essence was always that of pure evil, bickering for vengeance and, sadistically, deriving a kick from human misery. This is the story of a man who became what would be called a monster in life and death, an aberration born of a series of unfortunate events. The legend of Freddy Krueger stands as a testament to the fact that fear never really becomes extinct. As we discover the lives of those around his family, we hope to find the seeds of this malevolence and how it affected the people related to him.
Your birth was a curse on the whole of humanity.
Amanda Krueger, mother. Let's start off with Freddy's mother. Amanda Krueger. Amanda's life was filled with tragedy and trauma, events that would profoundly influence the fate of her son. At the age of 18, Amanda chose to become a nun and took the name Sister Mary Helena. She was assigned to care for the patients of Weston Hills Psychiatric Hospital in 1941, including those kept in the infamous tower designated for the sickest patients. It was just a few days before Christmas, and Amanda found herself unintentionally trapped in the tower as the guards locked up and hurried to get home to spend time with their family. She was, of course, left alone with the prisoners for a few days and had to endure severe beatings and sexual assaults during that period. She was pregnant and on the verge of death when she was eventually found. 9 months later, Amanda gave birth to Freddy. Shortly after his birth, he was turned over to the state and adopted by a certain Mr. Underwood, an abusive drunkard I was talking about earlier. We will talk more about him in a while. Amanda followed her son's case in court after he was arrested for the murders of several of the local children. Gut-sickened by his release on a technicality, Amanda took her own life shortly after the announcement. After that, the character of Amanda Krueger would appear twice in ghost form to help those fighting her son. Her first film appearance was in the third part of the franchise, which was dubbed Dream Warriors, where she played an old nun named Sister Mary Helena. She helped Dr. Neil Gordon's attempts to preserve the surviving Elm Street children. Neil eventually learned about her burial site and realized that Freddy's mother had been assisting them all along. Her second appearance was in the fifth part, The Dream Child. Following his defeat in The Dream Master, a vengeful Freddy somehow manipulated Amanda to rebirth himself into the dream world. Feeling that his mother was too powerful, an ever-fearful Freddy worked tirelessly to restrain her spirit in limbo. At the same time, Alice Johnson had to find Amanda's resting place to tap into her power to stop Freddy. In a race against time, Alice enlisted the help of a friend in searching for Amanda's body. In the end, Amanda's spirit was freed just in time to help Alice defeat Freddy. A weakened Freddy was then reduced into an infant form, which Amanda absorbed back into herself. However, Freddy would eventually break free in Freddy's Dead. Mr. Underwood, adoptive father. Next up on our list is the alcoholic abuser who somehow got permission to adopt Freddy. Unfortunately for Freddy, this marked the beginning of a deeply troubled and violent upbringing. Mr. Underwood was an alcoholic who both verbally and physically abused Freddy consistently. His favorite method of punishing Freddy was to whip him with a belt. Accordingly, Freddy grew up in a house full of terror and pain. The incessant torment he went through dug deep scars, which one day would come out in the aggressive behavior of Freddy. Underwood's brutality and negligence were partly responsible for framing Freddy's sinister and distorted mind, which eventually turned him into the Springwood Slasher. It all started at some point during his teenage years when Freddy grew tired of the constant abuse inflicted by his foster father. One day, as Mr. Underwood returned home drunk, Freddy decided to take matters into his own hands. He laughed off his father's blows and eventually killed him by stabbing him in the eye with a straight razor, making Mr. Underwood his first ever victim. This killing was defining, for it represented Freddy embracing evil completely. The influence Mr. Underwood had in the early life of Freddy Krueger is a brutal criticism of the amount of abuse and neglect that can truly create a person's fate. The violence created a vicious cycle of events, which began with what Mr. Underwood originally did to Freddy and then continued years later as Freddy became the legendary murderer. Loretta Krueger, wife. Next on our list is Freddy's wife, Loretta Krueger. How can a sane person fall in love with this madman? Let's find out. Not much is known about Loretta's earlier life in Springwood or how her relationship with Freddy had started when he was not yet a killer. It is hinted that Loretta was in high school when she first met with Freddy, who had dropped out of high school and worked there as a janitor. Surely, Loretta found something positive in Freddy that made her truly fall in love with him, and apparently he felt the same way about her. At that point in time, Freddy was making a lot of effort to have a normal life for Loretta and their 6-year-old daughter, Catherine. However, Freddy was unable to control his deadly inclinations. Soon enough, he created a private area in their basement that Loretta ultimately discovered. The room was loaded with bladed gloves, various weapons, and a scrapbook of newspaper clippings about children murdered in the neighborhood. There, she realized that her loving husband was responsible for the killings of the children. When Freddy learned of her discovery, he strangled her to death despite her promise to keep his secret. He did not realize their daughter was witnessing the murder. After killing Loretta, Freddy finally got caught. Not long after that, Catherine was adopted, moved out of Springwood, and her name changed to Maggie Burroughs. The tragic end of Loretta adds much horrifying reality to living with a monster. All the love she had for Freddy was truthful, but it put her in an ill-fated death. Her memory still lives in her daughter, who bears the burden of her mother's fatal destiny while wanting to be far away from the horrific legacy her father left behind. Catherine Krueger, Maggie Burnham, daughter. So what happened to Freddy's 6-year-old daughter? In 1966, Freddy Krueger was arrested for the murders of missing children. Consequently, his daughter Catherine was placed in foster care and eventually adopted by the Burnham family. She was renamed Maggie Burnham, her records were sealed, and she moved far away from Springwood, Ohio. After decimating all of Springwood's children in their nightmares for a decade, leaving behind only traumatized adults, Freddy decided to spread his murder rampage to another community. His only chance was his long-lost daughter, who had suppressed memories of her early childhood trauma and worked as a counselor for disturbed kids in another city. Maggie's involvement began when she questioned John Doe, who had been brought to the Recovery House youth shelter by 2 police officers. While questioning him, she finds a newspaper clipping on his person with the heading, "Krueger Woman Still Missing." Because of this, she took him back to Springwood to find answers about his past. On their way back to Springwood, she almost crashes the van as John was hallucinating, and they stumble upon 3 teens attempting to escape: Tracy Swan, Spencer Lewis, and Carlos Rodriguez. Maggie cautioned them to make a stop at a fair to call for help using a phone and get back to the shelter. Maggie and John eventually reach Springwood to find it deserted, with all the adults in insanity and no children in sight. Soon, a new wave of murders began as Freddy started killing the new teens who came into the town. Off he went, killing Carlos and Spencer before finally zeroing in on John. Before dying, John helped Maggie find her connection to Freddy, which Maggie recalled as a dream about her family, during which Freddy revealed to her that he was her father. After waking up, Maggie found the adoption document, which allowed her to finally know the truth. Even though Freddy wants to take control of Maggie's mind in his murder spree, she joins hands with Doc to take him down. She entered the dream world to see her father's past and confronted him at his dream core. Maggie finally killed Freddy in an intense battle by stabbing him with his own glove and releasing the dream demons that gave him powers, sending him to hell. After that, Maggie tells Doc and Tracy Freddy's dead, implying the end of her father's nightmare. It took Maggie much courage and resolve to shatter this endless cycle of violence that had plagued her family for so many years. Having to meet with Freddy both in the waking world and deep in the dream world, she proved that strength and goodness could overcome the forces of darkness. Maggie's triumph over not just a monstrous father was also a vindication of her personal strength and staunch resolution to protect others from horrors from which she herself suffered. Marvelous verdict. That brings us to the end of this video. The tale of Freddy Krueger drips in bloodshed and a real, profound fear of the unknown. Ultimately, his daughter Maggie Burroughs became the epitome of bravery. Hers was a victory of human hopes and strength over unspeakable darkness. Finally, as we close our journey across the Krueger family tree, there is a reminder that even with supernatural driving behind the character of Freddy, he brings forth a lesson in trauma and, equally, a lively spirit in some of those who dare challenge it. Who is your second favorite Krueger? Let us know in the comments section below. If you liked the video, remember to hit the like button and share this video with all your friends. I'll see you soon.